I got uninvited for my mom's birthday because it didn't look good next to my sister's boyfriend. Turns out I was actually his boss. He looked me in the eye and said, "If you still insist on coming home, then don't call me your father." 3 weeks later, the power, water, and internet in their house all shut off on my mom's birthday. Follow my narrative. Perhaps you will recognize yourself in it. Hello, this is Ryan. I'm 30 years old, and I live in a small town about 40 minutes outside of Seattle. My mornings are simple: a cup of coffee, a quick glance at the weather, and a 10-minute drive to my office. I'm a co-founder of a tech company specializing in sustainable energy solutions. It's not the sort of thing my family really understands. To them, I might as well be twisting wires and fixing gadgets in a dusty garage. But I've never corrected them. What would be the point? When someone asks about my family, my parents, or my sister Jessica, I usually smile faintly. It's been a while since we talked, I'd say, and that would be it. No follow-up questions. No probing. It's not that I'm hiding anything. It's just that there's nothing left to say. I haven't spoken to them in over 2 years. No calls, no texts, no birthdays, and no holidays. Just a long, silent stretch, as if the tether between us had snapped and no one bothered to tie it back together. I used to believe that family was everything, that blood was thicker than water. But 2 years ago, on my mother's birthday, everything changed. It started 3 weeks before her birthday. I had just booked a few days off from work, planned my trip back home, and even arranged to arrive 2 days early to help with preparations like I did every year. It was never much: putting up decorations, picking up the cake, setting the table. Small things that felt like tradition. I called my parents' house to let them know I'd be coming. My father answered after 2 rings, his voice as crisp and sharp as I remembered. I told him I'd be coming early, that I could grab anything they needed on the way. He paused. A long, heavy silence stretched across the line, so uncharacteristic of him that I almost asked if he was still there. "Ryan," he finally said, his voice tight and measured, maybe it's best if you don't come this year." I laughed, thinking it was some sort of joke. "Come on, Dad. I already got the time off. It's fine. I want to be there." But he didn't laugh. His voice grew colder, more deliberate. "Jessica is bringing her boyfriend this year," he said, each word clipped and precise. "He's a manager, important while spoken. He makes a good impression. Your job, well, it's not exactly comfortable to talk about. It would just be better if you didn't come." The room around me blurred at the edges. I gripped my coffee mug tightly, the warmth seeping into my palms as if it could somehow tether me back to reality. "What the hell did you just say?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. His tone didn't soften. He didn't backpedal or stutter. "You heard me," he repeated, voice icy and resolute. "If you insist on coming, don't call me your father." And then he hung up. I stood there for a long time, the phone still pressed to my ear, the line dead. I could feel my pulse throbbing in my temples, my palms slick with sweat. He had actually said it, as if I were some sort of blemish, some kind of stain that would mar their carefully curated image. The apartment was silent, eerily so. I walked over to my desk, my hands trembling slightly as I pulled up my banking app. I scrolled back through the automatic payments: water, electricity, internet. Every single one, set to pull from my account on the first of the month. For 2 years, I had been paying their bills. Quietly, consistently, nearly $400 a month. It had started off as a small gesture, something to help them out when the cost piled up. My mother had called one afternoon, her voice soft and uncertain. "Ryan," she had said, "things are tight this month. Could you help us with the electricity? Just this once." I hadn't thought twice. I set up the payments, made them automatic. I never mentioned it, and neither did they. Months turned into years, and the payments kept going out. It wasn't until I stared at the screen and saw the total, $9,842.17, that the reality of it settled in. Nearly $10,000. And I was the embarrassment. I clicked through the tabs, one by one, canceling each payment. The screen flashed. "Are you sure you want to stop this automatic transfer?" "Yes, yes, yes." I watched as the schedules vanished, each one slipping away like a weight being lifted from my shoulders. I wasn't doing it out of spite. I wasn't even angry anymore. It was clarity, sharp and precise. I had done my part. I had carried their burden in silence. And now I was done. 3 weeks later, on the day of my mother's birthday, I sat in my apartment with a fresh cup of coffee. I didn't call. I didn't send a card. I just waited. At exactly 4 in the afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was my mother. "Power's off. Can you pay the bill?" I read the message and set my phone back down. 10 minutes later, my father. "No water. Fix it." Silence from me. 5 minutes after that, "Jessica, internet's down. Guests are here. Can you fix it?" I didn't respond. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I finally realized that they weren't calling out of love. They were calling because I wasn't there to prop them up anymore. I sat back, watching the rain drizzle against my window, and for the first time, I felt something that I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. The rain pattered against my window, casting long streaks of water down the glass. Outside, the clouds hung low and heavy, mirroring the weight that had settled over me. My phone buzzed again, vibrating loudly on the wooden table. I didn't have to look to know who it was. The birthday party had started without me, but the essentials, power, water, and internet, had all gone dark. I imagined the scene. Candles flickering in the dark, confusion spreading through the room as my mother scrambled to save face. Guests whispering, Jessica glancing around nervously, and my father pretending to know what was going on. All the while, the person they had quietly deemed their family shame sat alone, sipping cold coffee in a quiet apartment far away from their chaos. My phone buzzed relentlessly. First my mother, then Jessica, and finally my father, each one more frantic than the last. But I stayed seated, staring out at the rain-slicked street, my mind wandering back to that phone call. The one where my own father told me not to come because my presence would be an embarrassment. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. What I felt was something deeper, an acceptance of who they really were and what I had been to them. For years, I had silently paid their bills, nearly $400 a month. The payments were automatic, taken straight from my account without a second thought. Over 2 years, I had spent just under $10,000. I wasn't doing it for recognition. I wasn't doing it for thanks. I did it because I cared. And yet, I wasn't even worth the trouble of coming to my own mother's birthday. Aunt Grace's call came later that evening. I saw her name flash on my screen, and I hesitated for a moment before answering. Her face appeared, pixelated but familiar. She was in her kitchen, the same one I'd grown up visiting, with its outdated wallpaper and creaking cabinets. Her expression was soft, but her eyes held a hint of urgency. "Ryan," she said, her voice quiet but firm, "are you really not paying for the bills anymore?" I leaned back in my chair, rubbing the back of my neck. "No, I'm not." There was a long pause before she spoke again. "They've been running around here, scrambling for money. They said you just cut them off. No warning." I took a slow breath, measuring my words. "No warning." I echoed. "Did they mention what Dad said to me?" Aunt Grace's eyes flickered with confusion. "What are you talking about?" The weight of it all came rushing back. I straightened up, leaning closer to the screen. 3 weeks ago, I called to tell them I was coming to Mom's birthday. Dad told me not to bother. He said I would embarrass them. Her face fell, and I could see the genuine surprise in her eyes. Embarrass them? Why would he say that? I chuckled, though there was no humor in it. Because Jessica's bringing her boyfriend, some polished manager. They didn't want me there to ruin the image, I guess. Aunt Grace's hand came to her mouth, her eyes widening with disbelief. "Ryan, that's..." She trailed off, searching for the right words. "That's not right." "No," I agreed. "It's not." Just then, the camera jostled slightly, and Aunt Grace's kitchen came into view, along with a crowd of people huddled around, whispering and casting glances her way. My mother's voice echoed from somewhere off-screen, sharp and demanding. "What's taking so long, Grace? Who are you talking to?" Aunt Grace's eyes flicked back to the screen, and she held up a hand. "Hold on," she whispered. "Something's happening." She turned the camera slightly, and I saw it, the party, or what was left of it. Tables crowded with half-eaten food, people sitting awkwardly in the dim light of flickering candles. Jessica stood near the doorway, her arms crossed tightly, while my father paced back and forth, his phone pressed to his ear. I watched, silent and unseen, as they fumbled to explain the blackouts to guests, making excuses about storms and service outages. Then, something strange happened. The door creaked open, and a tall man stepped inside, brushing raindrops from his shoulders. He was well-dressed, with sharp features and an air of confidence that seemed to command the room's attention. He greeted Jessica with a smile and kissed her cheek, then turned to my father and offered a firm handshake. "That's him," Aunt Grace whispered, her camera slightly shaking as she zoomed in. "That's Jessica's boyfriend." I stared at the screen, watching the man interact seamlessly with the family, chatting with guests and laughing as if he'd been part of their world forever. I couldn't help but notice the way my parents' faces softened around him, the way they seemed to beam with pride. My father clapped him on the back, guiding him to the head of the table like he was the guest of honor. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I knew him. His face, his voice, something about him was achingly familiar. Aunt Grace must have sensed my hesitation because she tilted the camera back toward her. "Ryan, you still there?" I nodded absently, my eyes fixed on the screen. Yeah, I'm here." My mind raced back through emails, meetings, quarterly reviews. Then it hit me like a freight train. "His name is Hudson, right?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Aunt Grace's eyes narrowed, nodding slowly. "Yes. How did you know?" A laugh then, a short, stunned laugh that felt like it belonged to someone else. "He works for me." Her face paled, the camera shaking slightly as she adjusted her grip. "What did you say?" I leaned back in my chair, still processing it myself. "He's on my team. He transferred to my division 3 months ago. I'm his supervisor." The silence on the other end of the call was deafening. Aunt Grace didn't speak, and neither did I. We just stared at each other, the weight of the revelation hanging between us like a storm cloud. And just like that, the family that had cast me aside to avoid embarrassment found their new golden boy working for the very person they called shame. I sat back in my chair, my eyes locked on the screen as Aunt Grace's expression transformed from surprise to disbelief. She adjusted her phone, glancing back toward the gathering, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Ryan, does Jessica know?" I shook my head, a grim smile spreading across my face. "I doubt it. Hudson and I have barely spoken outside of work. He transferred to my division just a few months ago. We exchanged emails, went over a few project details. That's it. I had no idea he was dating her." Aunt Grace's hand came up to her mouth, half covering her gasp. "Ryan, does he know you're a brother?" I raised my eyebrows and leaned forward, the weight of the realization still settling over me. "Nope, he has no idea. And judging by the way they welcomed him with open arms, neither do they." The call went silent for a moment, the only sound coming from the distant chatter and clatter of dishes at the party. My mother's voice echoed in the background, fussing over decorations, oblivious to the storm brewing just under the surface. I cleared my throat. "Grace," I said slowly, "I need you to do me a favor." She perked up, her eyes full of curiosity. "What is it?" "Find a way to get Hudson in front of the family, in front of everyone." Her eyes widened. "Ryan, what are you planning?" I gave her a thin smile, the kind that comes after years of being ignored, brushed aside, and finally stepping into your own power. "Nothing drastic, I promised. Just a little introduction." Aunt Grace hesitated but nodded. "Give me 5 minutes," she whispered, before the screen went dark. I placed my phone down and poured myself another cup of coffee, the warmth spreading through my hands as I leaned back into the soft leather of my chair. My mind wandered back to all the moments I'd been invisible, the countless family gatherings where Jessica's achievements were paraded around while I was barely mentioned. The way my father would puff his chest up when talking about Jessica's successes, while any mention of my career was brushed aside with vague nods and a quick change of topic. And now, her boyfriend, the polished manager they so proudly flaunted, worked for me. I waited patiently, watching the rain streak down my window in thin, unbroken lines. 10 minutes passed before my phone vibrated on the table, Aunt Grace's face reappearing on the screen. I answered immediately. Her camera was angled toward the party, and I could see Hudson standing near the buffet, chatting politely with a few guests. Aunt Grace's voice came through, hushed and careful. Okay, I got him here. Now what? I took a deep breath. Just bring him over to Jessica and Dad. Let them talk for a bit. I want to see what happens. She didn't argue, just nodded and moved the camera slightly. I watched as she approached, her voice pleasant and cheerful as she greeted them. Hudson turned, flashing a polite smile as Jessica draped her arm around his, beaming like she'd just won the lottery. Aunt Grace moved closer, just enough for the camera to catch the conversation. My father turned to Hudson, clapping him on the back. So, Hudson, he started, his voice dripping with that practice charm he always used on company. I hear you doing well. What is it again? Manager of operations? Hudson smiled politely. That's right, sir. Operations manager at Pacific Innovate. Transferred there a few months back. It's been a good transition. My father beamed, nodding approvingly. That's a real company, you know, he added, glancing pointedly at Jessica, who smiled brightly. That's real work. Not like, his voice trailed off, but I could imagine the words he left unspoken. Not like Ryan. I heard Aunt Grace clear her throat, drawing their attention. I didn't realize you worked there, Hudson, she said lightly. Do you know the head of development? Ryan Carter. Jessica's face tightened, her smile faltering just slightly. Hudson's eyebrows shot up. Ryan? Oh, yes, of course. He's my boss. The room fell silent, the hum of conversation halting as if someone had flipped a switch. My father stared at him, blinking rapidly. I'm sorry. Did you just say he's your boss? Hudson looked a bit uncomfortable, but he nodded. Yes, sir. Ryan's one of the co-founders of Pacific Innovate. He oversees a lot of our projects. I report to him directly. Jessica's eyes darted around the room, panic flickering in her gaze as she searched for any sign of disbelief. My father's smile turned brittle, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. Well, isn't that something? He murmured, forcing out a laugh that sounded painfully hollow. I watched from my screen as the reality settled in. My father's expression turned stiff, his gaze dropping to the floor as if the weight of his own ignorance was too much to bear. Jessica looked like she wanted to disappear, her hand dropping from Hudson's arm as she took a half-step back. Aunt Grace's camera turned back to her, and she raised an eyebrow at me. Did you get what you wanted? She asked softly. I chuckled, nodding. Yeah, I did. Before I could say anything else, Hudson's voice cut through the silence again. Actually, he added, turning back to my father, I'm supposed to meet him for a project briefing next week. I'll tell him you say hello. I almost choked on my coffee, the laugh bubbling up before I could suppress it. My father's face went pale, and Aunt Grace quickly ended the call before the tension erupted. I set my phone down, leaned back in my chair, and exhaled slowly. For the first time in years, I wasn't just tolerated, I was acknowledged. Not because of a family bond, but because the truth finally had its moment in the light. And I wasn't done yet. The rain had stopped by the time Aunt Grace ended the call. My apartment was silent, save for the occasional hum of the refrigerator and the soft tick of the clock on my wall. I set my phone down on the table and stared out the window, my mind replaying the stunned expressions on my father's face and Jessica's nervous smile faltering as Hudson unknowingly shattered their illusions. I didn't feel triumphant. Not really. What I felt was something far more profound. Clarity. For years, I had been the invisible one, the one who was barely mentioned in conversations unless it served as some comparison to Jessica's achievements. And now, without even intending it, the truth had broken through, cutting right through the facade they had spent years building. I went back to my regular life, attending meetings, managing projects, and watching the days roll by without a word from my family. It wasn't until a week later that the silence finally broke. My phone buzzed during a project planning session, flashing a name I hadn't seen in a long time. Jessica. I stared at the screen for a moment before swiping to decline. I didn't want to hear whatever carefully crafted explanation she had conjured up. 5 minutes later, another call came, this time from my father. I silenced it as well. After 2 years of silence, I had grown accustomed to living without their voices. That evening, as I was closing up the office, I received a text from Jessica. I'm sorry, I didn't think Hudson would find out like that. He told me you were his boss. I had no idea. Please, Ryan, talk to him. He hasn't been the same since the party. He won't answer my calls. Can you fix this? I read the message twice before setting my phone back down. Fix it? As if it were a cracked vase or a crooked picture frame. I walked out of my office and headed to my car, the message still fresh in my mind. She didn't care about what I went through or what my father had said to me. She only cared that her perfect image had been smudged. 3 days later, as I was leaving the office, I saw Hudson standing outside near the entrance, his shoulders hunched against the cold. He looked up as I approached, his face flushing with a mixture of relief and discomfort. "Mr. Carter," he called out, stepping forward. I stopped, shoving my hands into my coat pockets. "Hudson," I replied evenly. "Something I can help you with." He hesitated, glancing around before speaking. "I just wanted to say, I didn't know," he began, his voice soft. "I didn't know you were Jessica's brother. If I had, things might have been different." I studied him for a moment, watching the way he shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "Would it have mattered?" I asked. He looked down, nodding slightly. "Yeah, it would have. I didn't know you two weren't on good terms." She always made it sound like. He paused, searching for the right words. "Like you were distant. Like you didn't care." I almost laughed. Of course, that was the narrative. The brother who drifted off and forgot his family while she played the role of the perfect daughter. I met his gaze steadily. "I care, Hudson," I said quietly. "But there's a difference between caring and being used." He swallowed hard, his face flushing again. "I ended things with her," he admitted, his eyes dropping to the pavement. "After what I saw, the way they talked about you, I couldn't stay with someone like that." I stared at him for a long moment, letting his words settle. "That was your choice," I said finally. "I didn't ask for it." Hudson nodded, his expression firming up. "I know. I wanted you to know it wasn't because of you. It was because of them." We stood there in silence for a moment before he turned to leave. I watched him go, feeling something uncoil in my chest, something I hadn't even realized had been wound tight for years. The next morning, I woke to the sound of frantic knocking on my apartment door. I groaned, throwing the blankets off and padding over to the door. Through the peephole, I saw them. My parents. My father looked the same as he always did, straight-backed and stern, while my mother hovered just behind him, her hands clutched tightly to her purse. I hesitated for a moment before unlocking the door and pulling it open. They stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, my father brushing past me as if he still owned the place. My mother smiled weakly, her eyes scanning the room with a forced politeness. "Ryan," she greeted, her voice tight. "It's good to see you." I shut the door and leaned against it, crossing my arms. "What do you want?" My father shot me a sharp look, the kind that once sent me scurrying to my room when I was a kid. But I didn't flinch. "Not anymore. We need to talk," he said bluntly. "About family. About responsibilities." I raised an eyebrow. "Family? You mean the same family that told me not to come to my own mother's birthday because I was an embarrassment?" He cleared his throat, ignoring the jab. "Look," he began, his voice dropping to something softer, almost rehearsed. "I might have been harsh, but you need to understand that family supports each other. We raised you, Ryan. We gave you everything. And now that you're successful, it's only right that you give back." I couldn't help it, I laughed. A sharp, unexpected laugh that spilled out before I could contain it. My mother flinched, her eyes dropping to the floor. "You want to give back?" I asked, stepping forward. "For 2 years, I paid your bills. Your power, water, internet, everything. And not once did you say thank you. Not once did you even acknowledge it. But now that you've lost face with Jessica's boyfriend, you come crawling back." My father stiffened, his jaw tightening. "It's not like that," he growled. "You don't understand." "No." I cut him off, my voice steady. "I understand perfectly. You were fine with me paying the bills as long as it was in the dark. As long as nobody knew it was me keeping the lights on. But the second it got messy, the second it wasn't convenient, I was suddenly an embarrassment." My mother opened her mouth to speak, but I held up a hand. "Save it," I said quietly. "I'm done pretending that I don't know what's going on. You didn't come here to make things right. You came here because your image is ruined, and you think I'm the one who can fix it." The room fell silent, my parents staring at me like I'd grown two heads. I took a step back, gesturing toward the door. "We're done here," I said simply. "There's nothing left to talk about." My father's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. My mother hesitated before turning slowly, her eyes glassy and unfocused. "Ryan, we're family," she whispered. "That has to mean something." I met her gaze steadily. "It does," I agreed. "But it's not the kind of family I want to belong to anymore." They left quietly, the door clicking shut behind them. I watched them go, feeling that familiar sense of clarity settle over me again. They had come to collect a debt that was never owed, and I had finally stopped paying. The sun was shining through my window the next morning, casting long, thin streaks of light across my living room floor. I stood there for a moment, the silence of the apartment heavier than usual. It was done. They had come, expecting things to go back to how they were. Me quietly paying the bills, standing on the sidelines while they played pretend. And for the first time, I hadn't caved. I hadn't bent under the weight of their expectations. The calls came in waves. First my father, then Jessica, and finally my mother. Voicemail after voicemail, all with varying degrees of guilt, anger, and desperation. I didn't listen to any of them. I simply watched as they filled up my phone, their words locked away behind icons I had no intention of pressing. A few days later, I received a text from Aunt Grace. "You okay?" I stared at the screen for a moment before typing back. "Better than I've been in years." Her response came almost instantly. "I knew you would be. Call me if you need anything." That was it. No judgment, no expectations. Just a simple acknowledgement that I had made my choice, and she respected it. The next week at work, Hudson stopped by my office. He knocked gently before stepping inside, his expression unreadable. I leaned back in my chair, motioning for him to sit. "What's up?" He hesitated, then closed the door softly behind him. "I just wanted to say thank you," he began, his hands folded tightly in his lap. "For not making things complicated. I know you could have, I don't know, made things worse." I smiled faintly. "I'm not in the business of making things worse," I replied simply. "I just stopped making things easier when people start taking advantage." Hudson nodded slowly, absorbing my words. "Jessica's been calling me," he admitted, his voice dropping. I haven't answered. I studied him for a moment, my fingers tapping idly against the surface of my desk. "That's your choice," I said finally. "You don't owe me anything, Hudson. Whatever you decide, it's on you." He looked up, his eyes clearer than I'd ever seen them. "I appreciate that," he said, "but I also wanted to tell you, I'm transferring back to the main branch. I think I need some distance from all of this." I nodded. "If that's what you need, then do it. Sometimes, distance is the only way to really see things clearly." Hudson offered me a firm handshake, and I watched as he left my office, his footsteps lighter than when he came in. I stared at the closed door for a moment, feeling a pang of something I couldn't quite identify. Maybe regret, maybe relief. That afternoon, I received a package at the office. A small, neatly wrapped box with no return address. I frowned, turning it over in my hands before finally opening it. Inside was a thick stack of papers and a handwritten note. "Ryan, these are the documents for the house. I know you probably don't want to talk right now, but your father and I agreed it's only fair. You paid for so much over the years, and we wouldn't have made it this far without you. Consider this our way of making it right." "Mom." I stared at the stack of papers in disbelief. The deed to their house, signed and notarized, transferring ownership to me. I flipped through the pages, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. They had actually done it. For the first time in my life, they acknowledged what I'd done for them. I wasn't sure what to feel. Satisfaction? Closure? Maybe both. But I did know one thing. I wasn't going back. This wasn't some invitation to reconnect. It was their final transaction, a payment for a debt they had ignored for too long. I placed the papers back in the box, shut it, and locked it in my desk drawer. There was no need to flaunt it, no reason to hold it over their heads. I simply accepted it as it was, a symbol of something that had finally ended. A few weeks later, I got a call from Aunt Grace. Her voice was bright, almost cheerful. "Ryan, you're coming to Thanksgiving this year, right?" I hesitated. "I'm not sure." "Oh, don't give me that," she cut me off, laughing lightly. There's a seat for you at my table. Just you. No drama. Just family. I chuckled, shaking my head. I don't know. It's been a long time. It has, she agreed. But not for me. You're always welcome, Ryan. Always. I smiled, the kind of smile that comes when you finally let go of something you didn't realize you were holding. Okay, I said quietly. I'll be there. Thanksgiving came sooner than I expected. I showed up to Aunt Grace's house, a modest place on the outskirts of town, its windows glowing with warmth. When she opened the door, she pulled me into a hug that felt stronger than any I'd had in years. The night was filled with laughter, genuine and unforced. I met cousins I hadn't seen in years, reconnected with old friends, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I belonged. Not because I was paying for someone's comfort, not because I was expected to prop up someone's illusion. I was just there, a part of something real. And as I sat at the long wooden table, the glow of candlelight flickering off familiar faces, I realized that family wasn't about who needed you. It was about who wanted you there without conditions, without expectations. I'd found my family, and this time, I wasn't invisible. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing to the channel. There are still so many stories left to tell, stories of resilience, redemption, and finding your own strength, even when the ones closest to you try to tear you down. Your support means everything, and it helps us continue sharing these powerful narratives with you. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. Join our community, share your thoughts in the comments, and let's keep telling the stories that matter. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.